What up, Facebook Live family and friends? Elliot Andre is back from Connected Roost. The head therapist is here with my friend Tommy.
Hey, everyone.
What's up, people? How is everybody doing today on this really slow and tired Monday? I'm not going to lie. Feeling good, though. Start of the week. Here we go. Tommy is a super cool dude. Met him a couple weeks ago. We instantly connected, and I'm super happy to have him interviewed today on the show. So, Tommy, if you could, just let our family and friends and fans out there know who you are, what you specialize in, what separates you from the field of mental health.
Sure. Hey, everyone. My name is Tommy Adanalian. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and a licensed addiction counselor. I own a private practice called Mountain Minds Therapy, and I also do some work with High Mountain Counseling and do some contract work with them.
Nice.
And there we do a lot of work in the adoption and foster care system, working with those families and kids in that.
Totally. So, I mean, I feel like a lot of people out there may or may not know how difficult it is to be somebody probably who's adopted generally and work on your mental health. So if you could tell us kind of an idea of what your day-to-day looks like, or what working with that population would be like, I think our viewers out there really appreciate that.
Sure. So it kind of spans, all across the board. You get mental health conditions, a lot of depression, anxiety, a lot of trauma, a lot of addictions work, especially within the family units when they're trying to get back together with the families. Yeah. Also a lot of care coordination and work with other agencies, GALs, caseworkers, all those kinds of people. So
cool. Could you explain to our fans out there what GAL is?
Yeah, GAL is a guardian ad litem. They're kind of like the lawyer. They look out for the best interest of the kid.
Got it. Really cool. So you're like on the ground.
Yeah,
like you're in it.
Yeah, I'm all over the place. And a lot of times working with these kids, it's hard to form connections and those kinds of things. So we have to think outside the box sometimes. And what I do is try to get people out of the office. Yep. And like for instance, today I'm taking a kid climbing. We're gonna go to the rock climbing gym and go meet up there, because I feel like it's so much easier to get kids to open up and be able to talk when they kind of feel comfortable. Yeah.
Thumbs up out there if you've ever been climbing, one, and two, if you ever felt like it was a therapeutic moment for you. I think a lot of times, I've, with Tommy, taken a lot of clients at my own practice climbing and seen just the power of how people open up and are able to, be more themselves, take that mask off and feel a lot more confident in what they're doing. And it doesn't feel like therapy.
Totally. And the other thing it does is I also use that to help people step outside their comfort zone. I feel like with change, it's really important to step outside of our comfort zone. Totally. With how our brains work, our brains like to go with what it's used to, what it knows. And so when you make these changes, it makes you feel really uncomfortable. And so kind of challenging people to step outside their comfort zone with something like climbing can really get people used to that feeling of that uncomfortable feeling of that comes with change.
Totally. And I feel like, for what I've known from speaking to other colleagues or doing reading and what have you, being adopted and being in the foster care system is not easy.
No.
And it's really you're being taken from your parents or put in social services because people aren't taking care of you. I'd just be curious if you could kind of disclose some information about what that looks like for some clients you might have worked with. For sure. And let the viewers out there kind of like really live what you live every day with these people. Yeah,
so sometimes you get a lot of resistance from kids working in these systems because they don't really trust people in the system.
How could they, man? Yeah. Really?
Yeah, exactly. And so what we do, like for me, one of the most important things is forming that relationship, letting those people know that I'm their person, I'm going to be there with them throughout this whole process.
Yeah, totally.
And being available, making myself as available as possible through, phone calls or email, and getting back to them, pretty quick.
So it seems like even more so than just being and working with these people, like you're almost like a mentor or something more like in that space. What's that been like for you in terms of that transition of probably being in like a typical office to like now being so much more open and willing to work with people? Well,
yeah, you really get to know all those people in the system, like the GALs or caseworkers that they're working with, the family, the parents, the kids, the foster parents, working with all those people, it can, you have to be there. You have to be willing to, meet with them and talk with them, answer any questions that they have.
Yeah.
I had something, but I forgot what it was.
That's okay. We'll come back to you. So there's a level of vulnerability that you have to display at a regular basis, right? And what's that feel like for you?
I think it's just I don't know. What do you mean by that?
Like in a sense of, you're working with these people, and you have to be open for them to trust you, and be on the ground running with them. And I feel like you have to be able to do that. You need to be vulnerable yourself and kind of take that mask off yourself in order for them to create that, to be able to create that trust and rapport with that client. So what's that been like for you personally? If you don't mind answering that.
It's like sharing some of my own challenges and struggles.
Right, exactly.
And like one thing when we're talking about change, for me, one thing that makes me feel uncomfortable is like presenting and doing these training kind of things.
Sure.
And so I've been.
Well, we're glad you're here and doing it.
So I'm stepping outside my comfort zone, doing this, and I've been signing up for other trainings and stuff. So talking to kids, like going through those processes about like how I can relate to the, some certain challenges that they're going through, man. Understanding that change. So.
Yeah, bringing yourself into it, I think, is such a positive thing, because people, for what I've noticed in my practice, sometimes, clients look at you in this space like you're like the perfect person, and you've never had any struggles. Right. And to me that's just a bunch of bullshit, because every therapist has been in therapy, usually, quote unquote, and every therapist should go to therapy. So in regards to what I've experienced as well, is the more we can kind of give and be vulnerable, and maybe self-disclose a little bit to those clients who've been going through some of the struggles that we might have faced in our lives at some point, is really helpful to building that rapport.
Right, and the cool thing about like what we do with at High Mountain Counseling is we have these contracts with Medicaid where we can do more intensive in-home family work.
Oh, I love that.
And so being able to go to the house and work out of the house, and we see them for between 4 and 6 hours a week. Wow. When it's at that intensive level.
Totally.
So you really get to know each other and understand how they live, and just they get comfortable with you being at the home and those kinds of things.
Talk about what in-home therapy is like in differentiating to some of the experiential or in-office stuff that you've done.
Sure. So it's a little out there. It's a little different because you never know what you're going to kind of walk into. Totally. Sometimes you have dogs running around barking and other younger kids screaming and stuff. So kind of just working through some of that, trying to get some private space and
totally, it's hard.
Work there. But I love it because you form way deeper relationships and connections with those clients. Yeah,
and if you wouldn't mind, again, self-disclosing or explaining to our audience out there maybe an experience you've had with a client, I think that'd be really cool. Like just an experience you might have had recently where you went to a home and it was amazing, or there were some bumps in the road. I think people really out there like to know what that looks like, because we can explain it and talk about it all day, but people want to know the grit of the stuff.
Sure. So got to think of a case. So I had a client, that they were really struggling with I don't know. I got to think of a client.
Yeah, take your time. You're good.
So
we're thinking right now.
Yeah, got to think of one. Next question.
Let's move on. No problem. So when we first started talking, you were saying that addiction and other things in the family system are really kind of prevalent, maybe. Generally, in the people that you work with.
Yeah, addictions and trauma.
Yeah, so let's talk about addictions and trauma and like what that's like and how that represents in somebody who might be going through something like this.
Sure. So one thing I'm a certified EMDR therapist. Nice. EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing.
Cool.
EMDR is really cool and works. It's very effective from what I've noticed.
Nice.
You can use EMDR for trauma. You can also use it for addictions work. So I do a lot of that.
What does that look like?
So basically EMDR was developed for trauma. And what happens when we experience trauma is our brain doesn't process that information in a normal way. Okay. So what happens is that you go into that fight or flight mode when you have that stress response. So you start feeling panicked, you go into fight or flight, it's automatic response. When that happens, your frontal cortex, all your thinking and processing happens, gets shut down. Okay. So your brain can't really store that information in a normal, healthy way. How it's stored differently is that information gets stored through sensory fragments. Okay. So what can happen what sensory fragments mean is it's
perfect. Just about to ask.
Images, sights, sounds. So your brain normally stores memories like stories, but when you have that stress response, it's not stored through stories. It's stored through these fragments. And so it's just like a little image or a sound or a smell. So what can happen is you can easily become triggered by those senses.
Sure, gotcha.
For example, if you're a vet and you hear backfire from a car or something, you might think that's a gun going off, and so then you start to feel panic.
Sure, super triggering. Absolutely.
Very, very triggering. So what EMDR does is it kind of helps bring those sensory fragments together, helps it pass through the frontal cortex, so then your brain can kind of process that information.
And what does that look like? I mean, I think I mean, thumbs up if you're like, what does that look like? Because maybe I'm interested in doing so.
Yeah. So how it works is what you do is you kind of start with a target memory, something that was really stressful, major stressful event. And then we kind of get you activated within your senses. So like the sights and sounds that you...
So you're bringing that up in session.
In session.
You're like, let's deep dive into this.
Right. And then what you do, like after you get them kind of activated in that, you hold these buzzers or you do eye movements, you do that bilateral back and forth stimulation. And so then what happens is that's going to cause, it could cause a few things to happen. Either that memory's going to change a little bit. You might have a new memory pop up. You might recognize some body sensations. And then whatever comes up, you just kind of go from there and just keep buzzing. Your brain's going to process through that information.
What does the buzzing do then in regards to helping you get through something?
It creates bilateral stimulation. So it's left, right. So you're using both parts of your brain, that feeling, sensing side and that logical side. So basically...
It's powerful, man.
Yeah, it's really cool. So it's kind of like that feeling you get where, you might have that feeling where logically you can tell yourself, this isn't something that I should worry about. But feeling wise, you're like, you feel nervous and upset. And so what it does, it kind of helps bring those two together so that you actually believe that
that's crazy.
Okay. It's really cool stuff.
So in that space, when working with, somebody who has experienced adoption or has been in the foster system, I feel like that in itself is such a powerful moment because, like, I mean, they've been and through so many traumatic experiences, like being ripped away from your family, being put in a place where they're not wanting to be. So, any age group can do EMDR, right? Right. And have you noticed that the younger kids take to it better than some of the older ones, or like the demographic and what that looks like? Yeah. So I'd say like the younger ones, it works quicker. Sure. Probably like adolescents probably work the quickest. Sure. From what I've noticed. And then, part of the reason for that could be that all our experiences are built on top of each other. Sure. So if you have tons and tons of experiences, it's going to get a little bit more. So it's like harder to peel the layers back? Yeah, it's harder to peel. Right. When like the memories are almost fresh in people's minds, like they have that ability to kind of work through it a little bit more, assisted, of course. But in that space, it's still difficult. I mean, let's be honest. If you've experienced, there's no hierarchy of struggles or experiences for anybody, obviously. So anybody can experience one thing or the other. Right. But yeah, that type of therapy seems like should be used so much more prevalently in our practices, honestly. Because I mean, trauma is everywhere, and it can happen to anyone, and it doesn't discriminate. And anybody can feel as if a traumatic experience is for one person would be different for the next, but people share that same kind of moment. I wonder, and I've been doing some reading about trauma, and a couple of the books or places or people I've talked to said like there's big T's and little T's. What's your take on that? Yeah, so big T trauma being like a single event, and little T traumas are through more like repetitive event. Yeah, like repetitive kind of events, like being abused and those kinds of things. So yeah, what I've noticed with EMDR is that like those big T, like those single event traumas, seem to be able to process a little easier. But not that. Interesting. That's what I've noticed. Yeah, but tell me more about that. Like, people want to know. When you say that, they're like, now, like, why? Sure. I don't know why that is. It's just, I feel like because there's less kind of memories entangled with. Sure. That. So less repetition in regards of like one event happens and then clicking or going through the process is a little bit easier to move through. because there's not something repetitively saying like, you're here, I'm around in that regard.
Right, and then you have those little ones, or not that they're little, but those events where you're being like, for example, like abused for several years. Right. Tons and tons.
Yeah, other little moments that you think of because
Memories.
That looks different. Yeah, and that looks different every time probably in that regard.
Right.
No, trauma is a tough thing, people, honestly, and I'm so glad we're talking about it because, we need to just destigmatize what that looks like. I think a lot of times people are fearful of expressing that they've experienced that.
Right.
And I think that's probably a big part of, working in the foster care system and people who've been adopted. Like, that's hard for them to express.
Totally.
And I don't know if you've experienced this, but I work with an adolescent who's been adopted, and he gets in his face where like he wants to meet his birth mom, but then he doesn't, and he's met her in the past, and she's done some really shitty stuff to him, but then he still goes back. And he's still like in this constant like, where do I go? How do I fit? Where do I feel? Because his parents who adopted him never thought they could have kids, and then they had 3 kids after him.
Wow.
So that in itself, to me, for him, as much as he might not want to or can't process how to say that is traumatic, it was. To feel like, I was able to be a part of this family, and then other people came along, and like, where do I go? So I don't know if you've ever experienced that as well, like in like mixed families, what that may look like for some of the kids you've worked with.
Yeah. Those big mixed families. It can kind of get pretty complicated. Trying to keep they want to be connected, but then they don't.
Right. So how's that showing up in some of the clients you've worked with?
Well, you gotta, they just,
I mean, disclose as much as you can, or what it's been like in your experience. I mean, people want to know what that's like because people who are watching have experienced that, in that space.
Yeah. So
generalize, it's okay.
Yeah. So one thing to also know about trauma is like the like when you are I'll go back to like what you said about like how like trauma comes out in so many different ways.
Yeah.
And one thing that we noticed, or that I've noticed, is working with these kids and families is that a lot of times kids revert back to like when those senses are being kind of triggered. Kids kind of revert back to the age that they were at.
That's huge, man.
When they were experiencing that trauma. So, you might have a 15-year-old that was traumatized when they were like 8 or something. And when those senses are getting triggered, that they're acting like it looks like an 8-year-old. That they're going to be screaming their head off. And, throwing little temper tantrums and stuff like that. So just being able to recognize that and be able to help kids, calm down and talk to them, like help them deal with it like a 8-year-old would, right? Like just hug them.
Yeah. It's like a lot of back and forth, and you're kind of going back and regressing, but also with what it seems like what you're doing, being able to say that that's okay,
right? And
then moving forward as you can,
right?
Man, I never thought about that. I've never experienced that before. I mean, that in itself is so it's almost like doing parts work too. Like a part of that person is there and they're kind of stuck in it.
Right.
And it's like how then you can find a space where you can feel that you can kind of help pull them out of it. And then also validating that, again, that's okay that they experience this. And it's not like you're judging them because they might revert back to the trauma that they had when they were 8.
Right. That it's normalizing it, validating their feelings and just trying to understand it from their perspective.
That's so powerful, man. That's so powerful. I think one thing that we need to talk about real quick before we wrap up is what it's been like, because I know you're working with adolescents and kids. What's the family dynamic like between you, the kid, and you being the therapist and the family member?
Yeah, you mean like the parent?
Yeah. What's that been like?
Well, it's always so different.
Right, general for sure.
Right. When working with in the adoption side of it, it's really trying to establish that connection between the kid and that parent. So, a lot of aligning, a lot of helping the kid understand the parent's behavior and decision making, and like why they're doing those things, and helping them make sense of it all.
So really taking the family system and talking about that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, because it might not be something that they're used to or that they've experienced before.
Well, how could they be used to it? I mean, it's like they're constantly in a space of like, where am I?
Right.
Where do I belong? How do I fit in? I mean, usually generally.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So just helping really ensure that safety.
Yeah, safety I think is a huge part of what you're talking about. and trust, of course.
Right.
I mean, I think a lot of these people who are in these types of systems like have a very hard time trusting. And I'm sure, half the time you're like trying to figure out how I can get these clients to trust me and feel like I can build that rapport.
Right.
Because if not, you're just SOL, really.
Exactly.
I mean, it's like one step forward, one step back half the time when you're in that space. I mean, I can only imagine. I mean, I deal with that with this particular client regularly because, he'll come into session, I'll see him 1 week and they'll feel real good and they'll be able to express what's been going on. And then the next week he's like a stone wall.
Right.
And I don't know, have you ever experienced that stonewalling experience? Yeah. I mean, that shit's tough, man, as a therapist. Like, it fucks with your ego.
Right.
Honestly. In the sense of, like, you want to be in that place where you want to be able to be open and communicate and all that. So, definitely experienced that before. And I'm sure you have too.
Yeah, and that's when, like, getting outside and, trying new things, can definitely. Yeah,
talk about that a little bit more, like this essence of working outside. What do you think that's done for some of the clients you've worked with?
I think it's been super helpful. I know for me, it feels better to, like, get outside or be doing something or working on something and talking. And so when the kid, that helps people put their guard down and, feel comfortable. And it's super helpful. It's very
awesome. I love that. Other than climbing, what other types of experientials have you participated with clients in?
Just gone on, like, some hikes, a couple hikes.
Nice.
I'm really hoping to get backpacking trips.
Dude, come on. Don't say that and not, like, plug it right now.
Well, the permitting process
of course. I don't doubt it. Well, you got to get so many hoops and ladders to go through.
Yeah, so still working on it. But that's the hope, one day to do backpacking trips.
I got you. I support that.
Yeah.
100%. 100%. I love that. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone, for tuning in today. Yeah, we really appreciate your time and energy and giving us space to talk about this extremely important topic. Tommy, thank you so much for being here and expressing that, man. Like, for all those out there who need or want to get a hold of Tommy, if you could plug yourself and give us an idea of how we get a website or a place to reach you, I think people would really appreciate that.
Sure. So my website's www.mountainmindstherapy.com, and my phone number is 303-884-6768.
Awesome. Do you have any resources on your page as well for people to look at?
Yeah, there's a couple of different resources and some articles and stuff that I've written.
Fabulous.
There, so
yeah, awesome.
Check it out.
People, check this guy out. He's doing some great work in the field. Really appreciate you checking in and tuning in today. Peace out. We'll catch you later. Have a good week.
Thanks.
Yeah.